I manage a guest house in Kyoto, and last spring this American guy checked in wearing a shirt that said, "World's most humble person," in giant letters. He pointed at it and said, "See? I'm really down to earth. Not like those arrogant tourists." Then he asked if we could move a centuries-old bonsai tree because it blocked his view of the vending machine. "I'm Kenji, I've worked here for 8 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything until that moment." The funny thing is he wasn't joking. This man genuinely believed wearing a shirt advertising his humility made him humble. He explained that in America, real humble people don't hide it, they own it. When I mentioned that in Japanese culture, truly humble people avoid drawing attention to themselves, he nodded vigorously and said, "Exactly. That's why I make sure everyone knows I'm different. I actually care about other cultures." He then asked if we'd ever heard of sushi before he arrived. My colleague Yuki tried explaining that perhaps announcing one's humility contradicts the concept itself. The American smiled like he was talking to a child and said, "That's such an Eastern way of thinking. In the West, we've evolved past false modesty. If you're humble, you should be proud of it." He said this while FaceTiming someone back home at full volume in our meditation garden. Later that week he left a review saying we were nice people but could learn from American openness and honesty. He gave us 4 stars because nobody's perfect, but I am close. The irony was completely lost on him, which I suppose is its own kind of purity. I work the front desk at a hotel in Copenhagen, and last month an American woman arrived demanding to speak with management because someone had stolen her tip money. She'd left cash on the restaurant table, and the waiter had chased her down the street to return it, thinking she'd forgotten it. She insisted this proved Denmark was backwards about service. When I explained tipping isn't customary here and can be seen as condescending, she raised her voice and said, "I'm trying to be generous, and you're making me feel bad about it. That's so arrogant." She genuinely could not understand why her attempted generosity had been rejected. She went on for 10 minutes about how she always tips at least 25%, because I'm humble enough to recognize service workers. The way she said it suggested she expected applause. I mentioned that Danish servers earn living wages and don't rely on tips, so the gesture can imply they're charity cases. She looked confused and said, "But how do they know I appreciate them if I don't give extra money?" In America, we show humility by acknowledging we're not better than servers. The circular logic was dizzying. She thought paying someone extra money for doing their job was proof she didn't think she was superior to them. My brother works at a traditional bathhouse in Iceland, and an American couple walked in last summer wearing full swimsuit. When he explained that everyone showers completely naked before entering the communal baths, and that this is both hygienic and customary, the wife gasped and said, "We're not perverts." Her husband added, "We're respectful people. We don't impose our bodies on strangers." My brother, whose job includes enforcing this rule, tried explaining it's about cleanliness and cultural respect. The husband interrupted saying, "I respect myself too much to get naked in public. That's called dignity." They insisted on keeping their suits on and filed a complaint about forced exhibitionism. In the complaint, the wife wrote that she was a humble Christian woman who doesn't flaunt her body. She seemed to think that Icelandic centuries-old bathing traditions had been established specifically to violate her personal boundaries. The stunning self-centeredness of believing an entire country's cultural practice exists to test your comfort level was somehow framed as humility. My brother still talks about it when he needs a good laugh. I teach at a university in Amsterdam, and during orientation an American exchange student raised his hand and asked why we don't say the Pledge of Allegiance before class. When I explained that's an American practice, not a universal one, he looked genuinely shocked and said, "But don't you love your country?" I told him we do, we just express it differently. He shook his head and said, "That's sad. Americans are humble enough to declare their patriotism every day. We're not ashamed. Several Dutch students exchanged glances, but he didn't notice. He continued explaining that daily pledges keep you grounded and remind you that you're part of something bigger. When a German student mentioned that mandatory patriotic declarations carry uncomfortable historical associations in Europe, the American said, "See, that's the difference. We're confident enough in our humility to be openly patriotic. You guys are still hung up on the past." He said this in a room full of students whose grandparents had lived through Nazi occupation. The complete inability to read the room was staggering. He thought his obliviousness was actually wisdom. I run a small bookshop in Prague, and last summer an American tourist came in asking if we had any real books, not just European ones. When I asked what she meant, she said, "You know, books that matter. American authors." I gestured to our extensive international literature section, including many American writers. She glanced at it and said, "Oh, I meant like famous ones. Do you have anything people have actually heard of?" I pointed out Graham Greene, Garcia Marquez, and Murakami on the display shelf. She squinted and said, "I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm a humble person who knows quality. These look boring." She went on to explain that she specifically wanted humble, relatable stories, like reality TV stars' memoirs. When I showed her our biography section, she sighed and said, "You're not getting it. I want books about real people, not fancy literature. I'm a simple person with simple tastes, not like those snobs who pretend to like classics." The way she framed intellectual curiosity as pretentious snobbery while calling her own lack of curiosity humility was remarkable. She left saying Americans just connect with stories better because we're more down to earth. She actually believed her dismissal of centuries of world literature was a sign of authenticity rather than ignorance. I own a cafe in Melbourne, and a few months back an American ordered a flat white and immediately said, "I need this remade. There's not enough coffee." I explained that's the correct ratio for a flat white. She insisted, "I drink coffee every day. I know what I'm talking about. Just make it stronger." When I offered her a long black instead, she said, "No, I want what I ordered, just made right." I remade it with an extra shot, and she took one sip and said, "Perfect. See? All you had to do was listen." She left a 3-star review saying, "Nice place, but they don't know coffee. Good thing I was patient and humble enough to teach them." The confidence with which she assumed Australian baristas didn't understand coffee was breathtaking. This is a country with one of the most sophisticated coffee cultures in the world, but she genuinely believed her Starbucks experience qualified her to educate us. When my staff member pointed out she'd essentially just ordered a different drink, she said, "I'm just trying to help you improve." Some people would have just left, but I care enough to give feedback. She truly thought her unwillingness to learn about local coffee culture was a virtue. The review included a line about how she'd humbly shared her American coffee expertise with us. We printed it and hung it in the break room. My sister runs a restaurant in Bangkok, and last year an American family came in and the father announced, "We're adventurous eaters, not like other tourists. We'll try anything." When the server recommended our signature papaya salad, the mother interrupted and said, "Is it spicy? We can't do spicy." My sister explained it's traditionally spicy but can be adjusted. The father waved his hand and said, No, make it authentic. We want the real experience." The salad arrived, and after one bite the entire family started fanning their mouths and gulping water. The father called the server over and said, "Why didn't you warn us?" When she reminded him they'd specifically asked for authentic preparation, he said, "Right, but use common sense. Americans have sensitive palate. We're humble enough to admit that." He then asked if they could get the bill adjusted because we couldn't eat it. My sister explained they'd ordered it as requested, but he insisted, a good restaurant would have known better. We told you we were adventurous, so you should have realized we meant adventurous within reason. The mental gymnastics of demanding authenticity, receiving it, then blaming the restaurant for not reading their minds was impressive. They left a review saying food was too authentic, and gave 2 stars for not understanding American tastes. I work at a winery in Bordeaux, and during a tasting last spring an American man interrupted the sommelier to say, "I'm pretty knowledgeable about wine. I watch a lot of YouTube videos." The sommelier nodded politely and continued explaining the terroir. The American cut him off again saying, "Actually, I read that sulfites are dangerous. Do you have anything natural?" Our sommelier explained that all wine contains naturally occurring sulfites, and that EU regulations keep added sulfites minimal. The man shook his head and said, "I don't think you're understanding. I need healthy wine. In America, we're really educated about wellness." He went on to explain his expertise came from a 3-minute video he'd watched while waiting for his flight. When the sommelier offered organic options, the American said, "But are they like California organic? Because European standards are lower." This was said to a French wine expert in France about French wine. The sommelier maintained his composure and offered several biodynamic wines. The American tasted one and said, "It's okay, but I think American wines have more complexity." He said this while drinking a Premier Cru Burgundy that costs more than most people's monthly rent. His complete inability to recognize his own ignorance was matched only by his confidence in declaring it as fact. He left saying, "It's humble to admit when things aren't as good as back home. I manage a pizzeria in Naples, and an American tourist came in demanding real Italian pizza, not that fake stuff. When I asked what he meant, he said, with pepperoni and extra cheese, the authentic kind. I gently explained that pepperoni isn't traditional here, and what Americans call pepperoni is called salami piccante in Italy. He laughed and said, "Come on, I've eaten Italian food my whole life. Just make it right." I offered him a margherita or marinara, explaining these are the traditional Neapolitan pizzas. He sighed and said, "Fine, I'll help you out. Just do thin crust, lots of pepperoni, and that white cheese Americans use." When I explained mozzarella di bufala is what we use here and it's different from low-moisture mozzarella, he said, "I'm a pretty humble guy, but I know pizza. Just make it how I'm asking." I made him a salami piccante pizza with fresh mozzarella. He took one bite and said, "This isn't right. The meat's different and the cheese is wet." I explained those were the authentic Italian ingredients he'd requested. He shook his head and said, "I meant authentic American Italian. You guys probably don't know about that style since you're in Italy." The absolutely logic-defying assumption that Italian pizza makers in Italy don't understand pizza heritage because they haven't been to New Jersey made my head spin. He left a review saying we were too proud to learn from Americans about our own food. I'm a taxi driver in Dublin, and last summer I picked up an American couple from the airport. The wife immediately said, "We're not like other tourists. We researched Ireland." I said that was great and asked where they were headed. The husband said, "Take us to see Big Ben and the Queen's Palace first." I paused and said, "Sir, that's London. This is Dublin." He looked confused and said, "Right, Ireland. Same thing though, yeah." I explained they're different countries. The wife got defensive and said, "We know geography. We're not arrogant. But they're both near each other, so what's the difference really?" I tried explaining that Ireland is an independent republic and has been since 1922. The husband interrupted saying, "Okay, but everyone speaks English and uses pounds, right? It's basically the same." When I told him we use euros and have our own government, culture, and history, his wife said, "This is why Americans get a bad reputation. We admit we don't know everything, and locals get upset instead of just helping." The stunning reversal of making a basic geographical error and then blaming me for correcting them was magnificent. They asked if I could just drive them to London anyway. When I said it was across the Irish Sea and required a flight or ferry, they said I was being difficult on purpose. They left without tipping and later posted that Dublin taxi drivers are weirdly defensive about not being part of England. My cousin works at a train station in Brussels, and an American man approached her window demanding to know why announcements weren't in English. She explained they're made in Dutch, French, and German, Belgium's 3 official languages. He said, "But everyone speaks English. Why make things complicated?" She pointed out that English isn't an official language here. He scoffed and said, "That's pretty arrogant. English is universal. I'm humble enough to admit when I need help, but you guys should meet people halfway." The irony of calling Belgians arrogant for speaking their own languages in their own country while demanding they accommodate his linguistic limitations was completely lost on him. He went on to explain that, in America, we make things simple for tourists, as if that somehow applied to Belgium's responsibility. When my cousin offered to help him in English, he said, "I can figure it out myself. I'm just saying you should think about other people." He then asked her which train goes to that chocolate place, you know the one. She asked if he meant Bruges or Brussels city centre or perhaps a specific chocolatier. He got frustrated and said, "Why are you making this difficult? Just the famous one everyone goes to." She showed him a city map, and he waved it away saying, "I don't need that. I'm not some tourist. Just tell me the platform." He missed his train and blamed confusing European systems. My cousin said it was a masterclass in someone creating their own problems and then calling their helplessness humility. I work at a language school in Barcelona, and an American student joined our intensive Spanish course. On his first day, he interrupted the teacher to ask, "Do we really need to learn the formal you? In America, we're more casual because we value equality." The teacher explained that Spanish has formal and informal registers for different contexts, which is about respect, not hierarchy. He said, "That seems old-fashioned. I'm a humble person, so I just treat everyone the same." The teacher tried to explain that using "tú" with strangers or elders in Spain can be disrespectful. He shook his head and said, "I think you're overthinking it. Language should be simple." Over the next few weeks, he consistently used "tú" with everyone, including the school director and elderly shop owners, despite repeated corrections. When a local restaurant owner appeared offended by his overly familiar tone, he complained to the teacher that Spanish people are too sensitive. The teacher explained again that he was violating basic cultural norms. He said, "I'm being authentic. That's more important than fake politeness." The complete inability to understand that different cultures have different ways of showing respect, and that his way wasn't universally correct, was remarkable. He eventually dropped out, saying the course was too focused on rules instead of real communication. He left a review calling Spanish unnecessarily complicated and suggesting we learn from American directness. The teacher still uses his comments as examples of what not to do. I'm a tour guide in Oslo, and during a Northern Lights tour last winter, an American man kept asking when we'd head up to the Arctic. I explained we were already in the Arctic Circle, which is why we could see the light. He laughed and said, "No, I mean the actual Arctic, the North Pole." I clarified that the North Pole is the geographic point at 90 degrees north latitude, covered in sea ice, and not a tourist destination. He said, "Come on, I've seen pictures. There's that red and white pole thing." I realized he was thinking of the decorative North Pole from Santa Claus imagery. When I explained that was fictional Christmas decoration, not a real place you could visit, he said, "You're telling me the North Pole isn't real?" I said the geographic location is real, but it's frozen ocean with no permanent structures. He got defensive and said, I'm not some idiot. I know geography. I'm a humble guy who admits when he doesn't know something, but I definitely know about the North Pole." His girlfriend tried to quietly explain, but he cut her off saying, "I've paid for this tour. Just take us to the pole." I showed him a map demonstrating how far we were from the actual geographic North Pole. He studied it and said, "This map must be wrong. It's not that far." He spent the rest of the tour insisting I was gatekeeping Arctic tourism and refusing to photograph the actual northern lights because he wanted the real experience at the fictional pole. I volunteer at a community center in Toronto, and last month an American visitor attended our international potluck. She brought store-bought cookies and announced, "I'm keeping it simple. I'm humble like that." When people brought homemade dishes from their cultures, she said, "I could have done something fancy too, but I think authenticity matters more than showing off." She ate 3 helpings of everyone else's food while explaining her philosophy. Later, she posted photos saying, "Taught some Canadians that you don't need to try so hard to be likable." The beautiful thing about humility is that the moment you announce you have it, you've lost it. Real humility is quiet, observant, and willing to learn. It doesn't wear t-shirts advertising itself, doesn't correct locals about their own culture, and definitely doesn't mistake confidence for wisdom. Maybe that's the real difference, not between countries, but between people who think they're humble and people who actually are.